Pieguyrulz, Operation Birthday Review. Big important review teaches him that aging yearly really enhances viewing imaginative epics wildly.
Hey guys, Pieguyrulz here, and if all went according to plan, this video is up on November 4th, 2014, my 21st birthday. So what exactly does this mean? Well, I can drink alcohol, which I'm not gonna do because I'm not really interested in that. I can go gambling at casinos, which I was gonna do, but they don't look too much fun. They kinda seem like a waste of money, plus I've been able to play Scratch-Offs now for a few years. What this actually means is that now I am officially and completely an adult in the eyes of everyone except for rental car places, which doesn't really feel like too much of a good thing. I mean, yeah, there are perks to being an adult, but in general, it's just kind of weird. I'm not quite sure I'm ready. But that's not what you guys want to hear me talk about. No, I wanted to do a special review for my birthday. Kind of like how I do the holiday reviews, but instead of spreading it across a few weeks, these reviews are all going to be in one slightly longer video. Kind of like how I do with some of my SpongeBob stuff. I was thinking about what exactly I could do, and of course the idea of doing a bunch of birthday-themed episodes came to mind, but I wanted to do something a little bit more interesting, and the idea for reviewing all of the C.A.K.E.D episodes of The Kids Next Door popped into my mind. I thought, hey, there's quite a few of those, and it'd be fun to revisit the series. So I got the episodes on iTunes, and I started watching them, and the further I got, I learned two things. One, this is a great idea for a video, and two, I really want to rewatch more of this series. And no, the irony of reviewing a show that actively hates adults on my 21st birthday is not lost on me. That's part of why I wanted to do this, but more on that at the end. Oh, and before I get too far into this review, I should say, major spoilers ahead. Just including one of these episodes on this list is a major spoiler in and of itself. So please, if you don't remember the big twists in these episodes, go back and watch them. They're available on iTunes and, well, not actually anywhere else, really. But at least they're not too pricey. Before I review the first episode, I suppose I should talk about the C.A.K.E.D episodes as a whole. Each episode focuses on the kids next door trying to get the delightful children from down the lane's cake away from them, because the delightful children always force kids of the world to watch them eat their cake, without sharing. It's a simple setup, but they manage to put an interesting twist on it every single time. Well, except for the first episode, which brings us to
Operation C.A.K.E.D. Capturize and kidnapify enemy dessert.
So this is not only the first C.A.K.E.D episode, but this is the first episode of the series. Well, after the pilot, No P in the Ool. As an introductory to who these characters are and what exactly they do, it's not quite the greatest. Numbers 3 and 4 hardly get anything to do, number 2 is stuck outside the entire time. And if you didn't know any better from the other episodes, it would just seem like these kids are breaking into these people's mansion trying to steal their birthday cake for no good reason. Yes, they do have some kids tied up at the beginning of it, but they're only in like one shot. After that, they're completely forgotten about. But I think the episode certainly gives you enough information that you want to know more. And that's just as good, if not better, than just telling everyone up front who these characters are and what they're doing. Putting aside this as an introduction to the series, how does it hold up as an episode on its own? It's good. As you'll see very quickly, it's going to get overshadowed by the other C.A.K.E.D episodes, but hey, it had to start somewhere, and this was what the Kids Next Door was like in Season 1. It would take mundane childhood concepts, like, I guess having to get stuck at some snotty kid's birthday party, into an actual, literal threat that the kids have to fight against. The concept of a global Kids Next Door wasn't even really introduced until Season 2. Probably the most memorable thing about it is the big bad adolescent. She's a little girl who transforms into this big, pimply monster whenever she gets angry. Also, her shirt has a big A on it, and I will never see this as anything but Alvin's shirt from Alvin and the Chipmunks. I really don't think that's what they were going for, but yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. Something I noticed in this episode, and really the rest of them, is how violent this show was. And I don't mean in the, oh, characters are getting all bloodied up kind of violence. I mean characters are totally allowed to hit each other. Number 4 pushes a little girl, and it's just treated as a normal thing. This is awesome, because as long as there's not any sort of blood, as long as it's kept kinda cartoony, it's really not bad. Moral Guardians go really overboard on censorship of violence, and it's nice to see this show be able to do pretty much whatever it wants. Also, in this episode, the Kids Next Door transition is a dark blue instead of black. I'll chalk that up to useless trivia that no one else but me cares about. The best parts of this episode are just getting to see some of the weird Kids Next Story things play out. Like, they literally cut the delightful children's mansion in half with a giant cake-cutting knife thing. Then they get their army of hamsters to wheel it away. It's also fun seeing the delightful children use party games as a means to trap the kids next door and play the big adolescent against them. While not necessarily funny, it certainly has a lot of goofy moments, like the characters getting stuck inside a pin the tail on the donkey, and their heads are all sticking out right where the donkey's butt is supposed to be. The downsides are definitely that the characters aren't really fleshed out at all, and comparing it to later episodes, this is just a little bit mundane. But hey, you gotta start somewhere. Next up,
Cake 2. Commandos attempt capturing enemy's dessert. They weren't obliging.
Now this is what I'm talking about. This episode is basically Cake 1, but with a ton of crazy action and twists and turns. It starts out with an almost perfect recreation of the first Cake episode. Kids are tied up, forced to sing Happy Birthday, the delightful children are there, standing behind the exact same cake from last year, and the kids next door come bursting in. You think, oh, well maybe it's gonna be one of those episodes where they reuse footage like Monkey See, Doggy 2 from the Powerpuff Girls. Or it's just gonna be a rehash or something like that. But no way, you find out pretty quickly this episode is way more than that, when this cake and this party is actually a decoy. The kids next door give chase and find out that there is a second cake decoy, and a fake set of the delightful children from down the lane, including Nigel's girlfriend. Mind you, this is still an 11-minute episode, and that's not even all of it. They finally catch up with the real delightful children, and they find out that the cake has turned into a giant monster. As if that wasn't enough, Lizzie falls out of the sky and saves the day, and ensures that every kid in the stadium gets a bite of that cake. This episode is just great. It's so fast-paced and so many things happen that it's just exciting from start to finish. And the episode knows when to slow down too. There's the part where Nigel realizes that Lizzie has double-crossed him and he's actually visibly upset at this. The episode could have played it like he was just faking to try and get information out of her, but no, he seems genuinely hurt at this fact. Not that it's the worst thing Lizzie's ever done. But still, you really get the feeling this is a very important mission for Sector V, and it was really soul-crushing to see someone so close to him turn against him. And of course she gets a redemption in the end. Number 1 even gets a cool one-liner saying, "You forgot one thing, delightful children, my crazy girlfriend." It's an epic and amazing 11 minutes, and I really highly recommend this episode. The first one's certainly not bad, but man is this a gigantic step up.
Cake 3. Commandos attempt capturing enemy's dessert. They have real extreme aggravation.
So this episode is nowhere near as action-packed or epic as the second one. Instead, it goes a different route. This is definitely the funniest of all of the Caked episodes. So the gimmick this time is that number 2 creates an egg catapult to fire at the delightful children because, hey, if the cake is made out of eggs, you can't damage it by throwing more eggs at it, right? You gotta appreciate the kid logic there. Anyway, the eggs hatch in number 1's room, and all of these chicks think that he's their mama. And that's where the comedy comes from. The other characters make fun of number 1 for being their mama. The chicks have to constantly go to the bathroom and everyone panics, tries to get them out of the place as soon as possible. And of course, number 2 has a joke where he calls number 1 a chick magnet. Outside of the chicks though, not very much about this episode is memorable. The cake isn't really featured too heavily, and the present robot monster thing that the delightful children sick on them is cool, but certainly not the most interesting of the things that we've seen the kids next door fight. And it really doesn't get that much screen time. By no means is this episode bad, it's just forgettable when you line it up to all these other awesome, epic, and interesting Caked episodes. It's certainly enjoyable and worth watching, but nowhere near as cool as...
Cake 4. Children's annual competition exposes devilishly fiendish Operation Upriver.
So starting with this episode, till the end of the series, the Caked episodes are more than just about getting the cake away from the delightful children. This one is all about tubing. There's a giant tube race, the prize is the cake, and the cake does play a major part, especially towards the end of the episode, but it's really about tubing. This is also the first of the Cake episodes to not have number 1 be the primary protagonist of the episode. Though each kid gets something to do, although number 4 doesn't get too much, number 2 is clearly at the head of this episode. He's the one that ends up saving the day, and it's his story that's the most interesting. And, not to make a cake pun, the sweetest. The highlight of the episode is the overall theme of number 2 believing in his father. Now, it's never explicitly stated that his dad is dead, but judging by the way him and his mom talk about his father, it sounds like he most likely is. And they just don't want to be blunt about it because, hey, it's a kid's show. Anyway, what really holds this episode together is number 2 trusting in his father. He trusts that his father didn't lie to him when he said that this inner tube was special. What makes this especially cool that it's number 2 is because he's the guy that loves technology. He's the guy that loves building big, fancy planes and ships and all sorts of stuff like that. The characters even mention that it's weird that number 2 wouldn't want an incredibly souped-up vehicle. So for him to say, no, I want to go with this old-fashioned tube because this is what my dad wanted, it really means a lot. And despite this being a definitely number 2-centric story, all the characters still get something to do. Number 4 gets stranded on an island. Number 3 flirts with number 2's rival. Number 1 is super determined to get the cake. Number 5 is racing against number 1 and has to deal with Tommy. It's a very well-balanced episode with a lot of different perspectives going on. And because most of the episode takes place in a race, everything just keeps moving forward. There's always a little bit of action going on. Also, this has to be one of Father's darkest plots. He plans to make the kids into the delightful children's birthday cake. It's never explicitly stated that he wants them to eat the cake. Maybe the implication is that the delightful children are going to eat the cake around the kids and the kids are just kind of stuck there watching them eat the cake. Or maybe the implication is, yes, he wants to bake them alive and then have his children devour them. Any way you slice it though, he definitely wants to cook those children into a cake. Now maybe I can cut him a little bit of slack if it was a pie, but as a cake, this is really evil. The episode isn't perfect though. When you really think about it, there's a few things that don't quite add up. First of all, that announcer kid isn't talking to anyone. Like, he has a microphone and you think there'd be a camera watching him, but no. There isn't, unless he's just aware and narrating to us, the audience. It's also possible that he's pretending to do it because he's a kid and he only does the narration just to bother people. Because let's be honest, he's an outright horrible person in this. He goes out of his way to make number 2 feel really bad. Also, how exactly did number 2's tube know when to deploy? I mean, I can buy the fact that his dad somehow put these things into the tube as maybe some kind of protective precautions, but how did the tube just automatically know when to do it to save number 2? I suppose it's possible that they detected the heat or something, and I'm totally thinking about this way too much. Yeah, none of the actual flaws are actual flaws. They're just little silly nitpicks I noticed. It's a very good episode overall, and definitely worthy of being the first caked two-parter. The confrontation between number 2 and Father is really epic and dramatic, and kind of feels like a reference to Star Wars. Which brings us to the next caked episode.
C.A.K.E.D. 5. Centuries after calamity, enemy dessert found in Void's emptiness.
So if you're not aware, yes, this episode is a big reference to Star Wars, with the Vulcan grip from Star Trek thrown in, and even a musical nod from 2001: A Space Odyssey. But mostly Star Wars, with references like That's No Moon, and a lightsaber-esque fight at the end with birthday candles. This episode is also seriously epic. Even before the theme song kicks in, there's this crazy zoom-in that goes past like thousands of Kids Next Door old-timey operatives. And then another gigantic zoom out when there's like this mushroom cloud of what looks like frosting. If that opening doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will. This episode also features the biggest cake of them all. It's a space station, and it has to be out in space because it's an ice cream cake. I love all the little clever things like that they do, and they have a lot of fun with the concept. Like how characters have to lick through the floor in order to escape, or how Father's unable to use his fire powers because every time he does, he starts to melt the thing, and how the ice cream men are like his stormtroopers. And I love how devilishly evil Father's plan is. He's going to destroy all of the ice cream everywhere, a la a Death Star destroying planets, just so the delightful children can eat the last ice cream in all of existence. He even succeeds in blowing up the Kids Next Door supply of ice cream. Though that does remind me of the one thing that really doesn't make any sort of sense in this episode. Why would the ice cream men help Father destroy all the ice cream in the world? I get why they'd be working for him in making this giant space station ice cream birthday cake, but it seems very counterproductive to their jobs to destroy all of the ice cream in existence. Yeah, the Kids Next Door has a lot of those fridge logic-y moments where if you think about it too much, it just doesn't make any sense. But because the show is the way it is, it's so fun and crazy and big that you don't think about it while you're watching. You just accept a lot of the weirdness as reality. That's what a really good show can do. It can trick your mind into completely forgetting stuff that doesn't make any sort of logical sense even in the show's world. And speaking of things that don't make sense, Sector V was originally going to do a Trojan horse type thing with the Delightful Children by making a fake cake and waiting inside of it. That cake looks horrible. It's literally made out of wood. I really don't know who they think they'd be fooling. This is very unlike the super high-tech, super awesome Kids Next Door. It looks like something number 4 built, which is ironic because he spends most of the episode inside the thing, while everyone else is up in space fighting a giant battle. He still thinks that he's going to be able to get the cake by fooling the Delightful Children. That's 2 caked episodes in a row where number 4 is stranded away from the rest of the team. In all the caked episodes, he really doesn't get too much to do. This episode also has number 18th Century be defrosted from getting frozen at the Alamode. Yeah, apparently that intro showed thousands of Kids Next Door members getting frozen at the Alamode, and it took 10 years to defrost all of them, except for number 18th Century. He's just getting defrosted now. While it isn't a character dying, getting frozen for like 10 years is pretty dark, but number 18th Century is definitely played for laughs. His shtick is that he's incredibly sexist because when he was around, girls weren't allowed into the Kids Next Door. What could have been slightly uncomfortable or just kind of weird becomes really funny when he's paired up with number 86, because she will not put up with any of that. I really like how the show handled genders and all that sort of stuff, because really when you get down to it, boys insult girls thinking they're icky and can't do stuff, and girls insult boys because they think they're dumb and that kind of stuff, and there's little remarks heard all throughout the series because, well, that's how kids act. And it's never shown that either side is being in the right for being sexist against the other. What especially makes this work is because The Kids Next Door is a show that is filled with such diverse characters, both male and female, that they're allowed to do this kind of stuff. But yeah, his shtick is kind of funny, and he certainly adds to the plot. Although I've been building this episode up, and like everything else on this list, I think it is a good episode. I'm not crazy about it. It's not my favorite of the cakes. Though it is certainly grand and epic and different from all of the other cakes, it can get a little bit dull at times. Sometimes it feels like the story is too big, like there's too much going on. And it's not that it's hard to follow, it's just that it doesn't always necessarily seem to flow together in the best of ways. And again, this is a very minor complaint. I just feel like maybe a few scenes kind of drag a little bit. And I think it might be the comedy that's just a little bit off. It's funny, but there's parts like number 3 trying to distract the guards that just go on a little bit too long. Also, there's a part where Father joins in with number 86 in poking fun at how number 18th Century doesn't know what modern technology is. It goes on too long, and to have Father kind of joking alongside number 86 just feels off. Not that Father can't be hammy, but it just feels weird to have them take a time out from the plot just to do what amounts to be a pretty stupid joke. But hey, there's plenty of this episode to like, and it definitely feels like a really big, grand story. At this point, it really couldn't get any bigger. I mean, you have a cake the size of a space station. What else can you do? Well, you do something completely different.
Six. Soda is exchanged.
So this episode is about number 2 and number 3, along with Bradley, the honorary number 6, driving this truck of soda that's illegal if you're under 13, while the Soda Control Board chases after them. It's a fun little adventure. There's constant action because they're on the road being chased. You get some interesting banter because numbers 2 and 3 aren't paired too often. And it's always awesome to see Bradley. If you haven't seen it before, you might be a little confused as to why I'm talking about this episode. You see, in the very last minute of the episode, it is revealed that number 2 and 3 were not delivering soda this entire time. It's been the Delightful Children's cake, which they literally deliver right to them, past the Kids Next Door roadblock. And yes, it is indeed the same cake design from the first cake without lit candles. This has to be one of the trolliest moments of my childhood. I mean, sure, there were hints, like the fact that the episode's named 6, and this would be the 6th caked episode. The fact that the little girl wanted this stuff delivered for her birthday. The fact that number 1 warns number 2 that he doesn't understand, but those are all fairly subtle things. I mean, number 6 is literally in the episode, so you figure maybe that's why it's called 6. Soda being delivered for the little girl's birthday party just kind of makes sense. There's nothing really fishy about that, although she does act slightly suspicious. And number 1 saying you don't understand could mean a million things. And you know what? Even though it comes almost completely out of nowhere, I love it. I love this twist. I love it so much. A lot of times when stuff isn't properly foreshadowed and mysteries don't give the audience a chance to actually figure it out, it's frustrating. But here, it's just such a holy crap moment that the kids next door just delivered the cake right to the delightful children in an episode that otherwise had nothing to do with the cake or the delightful children is just brilliant. How can you top a cake being a space station and an epic two-parter with tons of Star Wars references? Well, you bring it back and you fool everyone. And like I said, even before the twist ending, the rest of it is pretty interesting. But of course, it's that crazy, insane twist that will stick with you. And that's all of the Caked episodes, right? Nope. There's one very important one. That true story, I almost forgot about. Now, I didn't forget what this episode was. It's actually the series finale. I remembered that it was a scavenger hunt, but I didn't actually remember it was a scavenger hunt for a cake. So when I started undertaking this, I didn't realize that I have the amazing honor to review the grand finale of this amazing show. Could you imagine what would have happened if I had forgot, though? How many comments I would have gotten? I would have had to take the video down, do it all over again. Oh, man. Anyway, here we go.
Interviews. It's now the extra really very interesting end wrap-up story.
This was a controversial finale, and it's not hard to see why. They took a lot of risks, showing the main characters live action and old, telling us who got married to who, having number one leave Earth for at least a few decades, and then there's the plot. Instead of making the finale really big, really grand, and really epic, it's more of a giant continuity nod to everything that came before it. And that's not bad. In fact, there are so many cool references in this episode that there's no way I'd be able to list them all. I am very grateful that they took the time to make sure to incorporate tons of things from the series into here. And it really makes you feel like the people who made this show knew what they were doing and genuinely loved making this show. The credits even feature a screen cap from every episode. But the big problem with this is that this episode really isn't a story. It's a scavenger hunt. There's a lot of scenes with villains or other characters that has nothing to do with anything outside of just being a reference to an earlier episode. I could cut out at least half of this thing and it would still make just about as much sense. And of course, that's not getting into the last part of this episode, which isn't so much of continuity nods, nor is it really so much of plot. It's mostly just the characters saying goodbye to both number one and the audience. So let me just go through and tell you how I feel about each of these things. The live action segments. I like the concept, but I don't think it necessarily came across perfectly in execution. It was definitely different. It will definitely make this finale very memorable, at least that part of it, not so much the cake part, but the acting isn't great. From what I read, the actors were cast because they looked like the characters, or the creator felt that they captured the humor of the characters. And while I can't deny that these characters all look like they should and somewhat talk and act like they should, some of the line delivery is just off. And I don't want to call these people bad actors. Maybe it's more so just that whoever directed this didn't quite understand how to direct something that was live action. And also you have a lot of old people talking about like 2x4 technology and stuff. I'm sure some of the actors had no clue what they were saying. And then there's CGI father. You know, that was a pretty crazy reveal, but it just doesn't look right, and it takes you out of what should have been just this amazing, crazy, one last final twist, and makes the entire thing feel a lot more low budget than it should. Moving on to who everyone married and all sorts of revelations about them growing up and that kind of stuff. While I appreciate that the creator, Mr. Warburton, wanted to give us satisfying endings for all of these characters, a lot of it feels kinda shoehorned in. Especially some of the ways that this stuff was revealed. Like, midway through the episode, live action number 5 just drops the bomb that she became the leader of the kids next door, and she also kicked number 362's little brother out of it because he was a loose cannon. That's cool. I totally believe number 5 would lead the kids next door, but you just have a character tell us that instead of, I don't know, showing it. Also, apparently number 4 went to med school, and number 2 and number 5 got married. Okay, I'm sure there was some ship teasing with them at some point in the series that I'm not remembering right now. And I guess total slacker number 4 would be able to get into med school, but I can kind of forgive those two weird things because number 3 and number 4 got together in the end. And that just makes me happy. Also, in Kids Next Door fashion, they totally try to fool us into thinking that number 2 and 3 got married, leading to a pretty funny revelation. I wish they could have all been done like that. But no, we have characters just awkwardly interjecting that they did this thing. Now, as far as having number 1 leave the Earth to join the galactic Kids Next Door. Though a lot of people don't like this ending, I actually thought it made a lot of sense and worked very well. If the entire show is a metaphor for childhood, then at some point you have to say goodbye to that. At some point you have to grow up. At some point, change has to happen. So instead of having the show have the characters just age up and we see that happening, we get this metaphorically by having number 1 leave. It was well handled too, because they couldn't kill the character off or anything like that, and it would be lame to have him just leave the Kids Next Door or something. And considering what happens at the very end of the episode with number 5 getting a call from him, I'm not so sure he went that entire time without talking to his friends. Also, in previous episodes, there were hints that there is some kind of teenage faction of the Kids Next Door that even 362 isn't entirely pervy to, hinting that maybe the rest of Sector V didn't quite retire when they became teens. And I just love how the goodbye scene was handled. Everyone gets a moment, everyone just has such a sweet, teary goodbye. To me, it felt like a very satisfying conclusion. And though it was sad that number 1 is leaving, ultimately it's a happy ending because he's going off to fight the greater good. Don't get me wrong. There are other ways to end the series that probably wouldn't have made people as upset, and the episode as a whole could have been a lot more epic and could have led up to the Galactic Kids Next Door a lot more than it actually did. But I am satisfied with this ending. I suppose I should talk about the cake, right? And that part of the episode. So, did Father make this cupcake? I mean, where did it come from? It's kind of weird that he'd make a cupcake for the delightful children considering they have 5 mouths? It's also really weird that Father turns into a dragon. I don't understand why. I mean, they steal his pipe, so it makes sense that he gets angry, but why a dragon? Where did that even come from? And it's not like there's this crazy epic fight that follows. No, it's just kinda alright. So where does the cake really fit into all this? Well, the whole thing that sets off this adventure is that Sector V is put off the case of the cake, because they fail a lot at it. Seriously. They've never actually successfully retrieved the cake from the delightful children. The best they got was when Lizzie splatted the cake and all the kids got a bite. But also because they're kind of getting old and number 362's little brother's gotta take over for him because he's the new up-and-comer. But it all makes sense. If the first episode, aside from the pilot, was about cake, and there's been a caked episode every season, then yeah, it should end with the cake. And the episode kinda even fools you into thinking that it's going to just be a normal caked episode. Because right after they're taken off the mission, they return to the treehouse where they find out that the delightful children have taken it over to film a chick flick about their love with the cake, before discovering it's gone missing. So as a finale goes, I think it's good. I don't think it is the most mind-blowing finale ever, but I think it tells us a lot of what we wanted to know. It definitely has a nice long ending, brings back a ton of elements from a ton of other episodes, even if they don't really end up affecting anything, and even has a pretty cool final confrontation between number 1 and the delightful children. Not to mention some pretty good comedy at the fact that a lot of this episode takes place at a Rainbow Monkey potty training amusement park, complete with a log flume that's called Drop a Log, and a reference to Jersey being in the toilet, ha ha ha. So, I'm happy with it overall. As a caked episode, it's pretty good as well. 6 already subverted our expectations about what a caked episode should be like, so to have the finale be a caked episode would have been a lot more of a surprise if they didn't already do it for 6. And ultimately the cake really doesn't factor into too much, but from a narrative standpoint it makes total sense to end with a caked episode. And if you're unhappy with this finale, there's a lot of episodes in the last season that are two-parters that wrap up various side stories that kind of serve as finales to different parts of the series. Also, there's Operation Zero, which does play out a lot more like a big epic adventure than this, though that's not without its problems either. So that brings us to the end of this birthday review. Once again, I was thinking of trying to rank these episodes, but you know what? I can't do that. Yes, some are better than others, but man is it hard to rank things. So, I'll just tell you that each and every one of these episodes is worth watching and does at least one thing very well. The first one provides a very interesting look into the beginning of the series. The second one has a ton of crazy twists and action. The third one is ridiculously silly and funny. The fourth one is really touching and just has a great pacing to it. The fifth one feels incredibly epic and gigantic. The sixth one pulls a crazy, insane, out of nowhere, mind-screwy twist. And Operation Interviews is the finale to a show that I love. There's a few notes I have on recurring themes in the Caked episodes. For instance, number 2 has this egg beater gun looking thing in both Cake 2 and 3, and then number 4 gets it in Cake 5, but it never gets fired once. I really wanted to see how that thing works. There's also this running gag in these Caked episodes, and I'm pretty sure in the entire series, where characters aren't driving the ships they should be driving. In number 2, the fake delightful children aren't driving the ship. In 6, number 3 isn't driving the truck when she should be. And in Operation Interviews, number 2 steps away from the wheel to be a part of the team bonding. And lastly, yeah, Sector V totally sucks at getting this cake. Technically speaking, they don't even get it in Operation Interviews. Really, 74.239, after all you put number 1 and his friends through, you couldn't have at least given him the cupcake? And that's that. I had a lot of fun watching these episodes. I forgot how amazing this show was. It nails the action genre, definitely. And plot twists? Oh man, nearly every episode has one. Even the comedy of this show can be pretty spot on at times. I know this isn't the last Kids Next Door related video that I'm making, as this was way too much fun. But on a more serious note, I don't think I'll ever feel my age. I don't think I'll ever feel old. I love cartoons. I love just how amazing they are. I love how funny they can be, how action-packed they can be, how weird they can be, how they can just capture the feel of something. And this show captures an exaggerated version of childhood. And you know what? It was written by an adult. It was made by an adult. Adults worked on this show. If Mr. Warburton was able to capture what it was like to be a kid in order to write and create this show, then who says I can't do it just by watching? Yeah, growing up sucks, and trust me, I'm not gonna become one of those guys that's fixated on trying to be a kid. I'm accepting of all the responsibilities of being an adult, and all the positives and negatives that entails. But through watching cartoons, both ones that I grew up with as a kid, and ones that are made today, I'll be able to stay young, at least in spirit. And one more thing, no matter how old I get, as long as there's still an audience for it, I will review cartoons. This is something I love, and that will never change. Pieguyrulz, out.